Oh, man. Whew. I promised myself I wouldn't get emotional, but I think I'm lying to myself. I feel bad for all y'all that are like right here in the poll. I'm going to keep doing this to mess you up the whole time, all right? But listen, I was all those things that Blake said. I'm not on social media. I don't understand half the things. I have an Instagram account just so I can repost stuff from R7. I just got it too. So I don't have a cool factor anymore. But I'm excited to be here today because I get to build on the foundation that Olivia was talking about. And I tell you what, my buddy Jason, where'd Jason go? Where's he at? He's like, I'm glad I don't have to go after her. And I was like, yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And so, man, you did great this morning, Olivia, and I can't wait to see what God does in your life. Jason, it's a pleasure. One of the most exciting things for me in this whole process that I get to share the stage with one of my oldest and dearest friends, Jason Lance. Jason and I have known each other since we were probably 4 or 5 years old, before kindergarten. We grew up in the same town of Smithville. He grew up in town. He was an in-town person. I was an out-of-town person. I grew up on a dairy farm over there. My parents had one, and so sometimes Jason would get invited over, and we'd build hay forts in the mow, and we'd play in the hay mow, and we'd do those things. And so living on the farm has always been a part of my life, and so my vocation today is actually still in the dairy industry. And the dairy industry has been very, very good to me because it's full of very, very good people. So I sell feed ingredients to feed manufacturers all over Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan. I get a lot of driving time in the car when I'm making my trips to these different places. And so I spend that time listening to podcasts and sermons and learning. I don't have Sirius XM radio. I just have a regular tune radio, but I usually don't even use it anymore because I'm usually listening to something that's I just love to learn. I'm a lifetime learner. I don't want to pay for learning, but I love to learn. And so let's just be a little bit of who I am. I have a business partner, and we have several real estate investment properties across Ohio and Michigan, on top of having 4 kids, Blake, Mason, Carias, and Aniela. Mason's that attract me today. Carias is home taking care of our puppy, which is great because we don't have to run home and take care of it. And then Jen and I have been married now. It'll be almost 24 years this summer. Did I get that right? Almost 24 years? I don't want to add any extra. Actually, Trent and his wife and Jen and I share the same anniversary. Yeah. I hope she's not here because that's not true, actually. It's June 30th. Oh, you just told on yourself. You just told on yourself. Oh, my goodness. All right. Oh, man. Hey, listen, we've got some beds in our basement tonight, Trent. If you want, you can come sleep. You'll be over, buddy. All right. So listen, by nature, I'm not a preacher. I'm more of a teacher. God has wired me as a teacher because I'm a lifetime learner. So I'm going to teach you guys this morning. There's going to be times where it's going to be a little heavy, and I want you to be able to follow. So jot some notes down, take some pictures of the slides I'm going to put up on here, highlight some things, whatever you need to do to remember, because we're going to have this Q&A afterwards. And I want to have this robust conversation about the kingdom and its value. One of the things I think the church struggles with is biblical literacy. And so I hope today when you leave, you are more literate than when you came in this morning. That is my hope and my goal. But I have to tell you up front that I need to apologize up front. I tend to have a voice that gets a little bit maybe aggressive. And I don't want you sitting in your seats going, oh my gosh, she's yelling at me. All right? It's not my intent. I love the body of Christ. And so when I say things maybe a little passionately, I'm not yelling at you. I'm yelling with you. Let's put it that way. I'm yelling with you. Okay? So just up front, I want to do that because I think there's a challenge for us today. And I told you I wouldn't get emotional, and I'm going to try not to do that until we get to the very end. And even then, I hope that I don't get there because it'll be ugly, and you guys will feel sorry for me, and I don't want that. But here we go. One of the purposes of your salvation is to give the world a foretaste of the redeemed world to come. And that is good news. Let me say it again. One of the purposes of your salvation is to give the world a foretaste of the redeemed world to come. And that is good news. From the very beginning of the Scriptures, from Genesis to Revelation, the totality of the Scriptures tell us that God's plan is to redeem and restore the entire world. There is a promised hope that the way things are today is not going to be how things stay. They're not going to stay this way forever. And the scriptures speak of a day when man and God will dwell together again as they did in the garden. And we see this picture in Revelation 21 and 22. If you get a chance sometime to take some time to read it, don't do it now. But I want to point out a few things here in a moment about it. But once you understand what's going on in Revelation 21 and 22, and you get an idea of what that future redeemed world looks like, you're going to begin to live your life a little differently. You're going to live your life in hopeful anticipation of that day, and you do it by participating in a way that gives the world a foretaste of what is to come. Because the way things are isn't going to be the way that they stay. It's going to be different. And the implications of this are incredible. They change everything because this promised hope changes it all for us. So I want to talk through Revelation 21 and 22. Just real briefly, I want to make 4 points about it. Like I said, go read it on your own time. First one is going to be, God is going to dwell with man once again. All right? The barrier between heaven and earth that exists today that keeps us separated is going to be gone, and we will be reunited just as we were in the garden in Genesis 1 with God. He will dwell with us. 2, evil will be no more. Both personal sin and capital S sin. All right, I like to call it big S sin, because when I say big S sin, it sounds like, I'm sorry, I'm 12 years old, and now I've put that all in your head. But here's the thing, big S sin, this is the sin that causes miscarriages, cancer, mental health issues, malaria, floods, natural disasters, car accidents, things that are outside of our control that we have nothing to do about, and yet they wreck our lives, right? And all of us, no matter what happens, we are affected in some way, shape, or form by big S sin. And we have to, you guys are laughing at it. Come on. You're never going to get beyond this the whole time, are you? I promise I'll try not to say it again. But everyone experiences this and is impacted by capital S sin. All right, number 3, the people who reside in this redeemed heaven and earth are from every tribe, nation, and tongue. This isn't in 21 and 22. It's actually in Revelation 7, which is where we get our 7 from. Because the future church is multi-ethnic, it's multicultural. All right? And so when there's opportunities for us as a body to pursue these things, we should pursue them. If you live in rural America and it's all one kind of race and culture, you're not going to be able to do it. But when there's opportunities to blend all the cultures, it gives the world a foretaste of what is to come, and it is hopeful. All right? 4, Eden will be restored. There are trees in the garden for the healing of the nations, and everything is going to be reconciled. When things are healed, they're reconciled, right? And so everything is going to be reconciled and in right relationship just as it was in the garden. And all of this is a picture of hope. It is a picture of hope. So while Jesus was here, he was forming for himself a people who would live as if every day is that future day. Jesus formed for himself a people who would live as if every day is that future day. And to live like this, we're going to have to change our mindset, because I think a lot of us are raised in a way that we've been saved from something. We've been saved from hell, right? We need to change things in our minds that says we've now been saved for something, all right? We've been saved for something. We are to participate in the broader sweep of God's redemption for the entire world, and everywhere, and we'll see later in Jesus' life that he creates, everywhere he went, these little pockets of Eden. Everywhere he went, there was these little pockets of Eden, because everything as it is today is not going to be the way that it is in the future. So how are we going to live as if every day is that future day and create these little pockets of Eden everywhere we go? Well, we're going to have to reorient our concept of worship. And I bet you didn't think I was going to go there, because we just had some awesome worship time, didn't we? I'm watching you guys from the back. You are dancing. You are your hands in the air. You got people on the ground. There's so much passion and there's so much worship. And yet the Bible tells us that it is a portion. It is a part of what real worship is. The Old and the New Testament tell us that worship actually is closely connected to economic and communal justice. Worship, then, is a lived existence of concrete actions that promote justice for the vulnerable. Let me say that again. Worship, then, is a lived existence of concrete actions that promote justice for the vulnerable. Which brings us to our trigger word for the day, justice. There is a lot of baggage with this word justice. Some of you may have carried it in here today, and you're going, oh no, I didn't come here for this. Because I know what justice is, and it's not going to be what he wants to talk about. And there's a lot of baggage, and it's been a cause of much division even within the church over the years. But I want you to just stick with me. Don't bail on me here, because I know what I'm like. If I start to hear something I don't like or triggers me a little bit, I start to tune the speaker out. Don't do that. I beg you, don't do that today. So first I have to know, and this is going to be a very small show of hands, I promise. Just wait. How many of you remember the show Pee-wee's Playhouse? Oh, we got one who's under 30 that knows it. That's awesome. Okay, so Pee-wee's Playhouse was a show when I was a kid. It was on Saturday mornings. Like, look it up on YouTube if you don't know what I'm talking about. Like, it's like terrible. We used to imitate Pee-wee and like make the stupid noises. But on his episode, there was always a bit where they had the secret word for the day. And every time the secret word was said, my over 35 crowd is going, I know where he's going. Every time you said the secret word, you had to scream really loud. All right, so that's our word for the day, justice. And every time I say it, I want you to scream, okay? So let's try it one time. Ready? Justice. Oh, you guys are awesome. I didn't think you'd have any energy after you ate all my barbecued pork for lunch, and I figured it was nap time. Good job. All right, so listen, we're not going to do that every time I say justice because, he listened. Oh, man. I love my small group. They're so great. So let me get to defining what scriptural justice is, because overwhelmingly, justice in the Bible is restorative and fundamentally relational. It's about the right ordering of relationships and restoring those relationships when they've become disordered, so that everyone can flourish. Let me say that again. It's about the right ordering of relationships and the restoration of those relationships when they've become disordered, so that everyone can flourish. You see, in the garden, everything was in right order, and you know what happened? There was flourishing. All right? And so God has been working this theme of justice from the beginning all the way to the end. It's all the way through the Bible, and he's been working to restore justice in our lives because he wants us to flourish. And you can expand on this and go read the Sermon on the Mount. It just keeps going on from there. But justice is this dominant theme from page 1 to the last page. But justice is about fixing the relationship, and that might mean between people, individuals, horizontally between us. It might be between man and God. It might be between us and the economy, or us and the other social issues that go on in this world today. There is reconciliation that has to happen in all of these places. But let me tell you what it's not. It is not social justice. Social justice falls short because Jesus is absent from it. And the only way that a person can be a part of this new kingdom that Jesus inaugurated is through faith in him, because he is just and the justifier of those who have faith in him. The Archbishop Oscar Romero, if you get a chance to write down his name, Oscar Romero, look him up sometime. He was a Catholic priest in El Salvador, and he spoke out much on the injustices of the evil that was going on in that country about 50 years ago. But he often said that God has a preferential option for the poor. And when he says poor, he's not talking about people who don't have money or maybe they're poor in spirit. He's talking about people who have no social capital. They have no influence. They have no power. They have no ability to change the things in their lives into something different. And they are who the Bible defines as the poor, the immigrants, the widow, and the orphan. Scholars like to call them the quartet of the vulnerable. It's a little easier to say that, the quartet of the vulnerable, than it is to say the other four. And these are often the ones that God commands justice for. And so if God commands justice for them, then there is a social component to the gospel that we live out. And this is good news. So if worship is about just living, about righteous living, then we need to see where it says so in the Bible. Now, I think there's a lot of smart people in this room. And if I asked you to put your heads together with your neighbors and come up with a couple reasons as to why Israel failed in their responsibility to be God's kingdom, to be God's people, you could probably come up with a couple answers. Why did they end up in exile? What were they doing? And I think you'd probably come up with one really easy right off the top. You would say, it's because they were chasing after other gods. They were idolatrous. This was their issue. And I'd say you'd be right. And then you might talk a little more and you'd be like, oh, they were sexually immoral. They were doing a lot of things wrong sexually. And then after that, you probably would be like, there's a third one? What? I don't know what you're talking about. Israel was unjust. There was a tremendous amount of injustice going on. The Old Testament details Israel's long history of detaching the vertical relationship with God and from the horizontal relationship with his image bearers. And in so doing, they received God's judgment for it, and it resulted in exile. So I want to take a look at a couple of arguments from the prophets, because the prophets were writing to the people and saying, listen, you've got to stop what you're doing because you're going to end up in exile if you don't. And I want you to see for yourself if the prophets are arguing that their issue was idolatry, argument A, or if their issue was injustice, argument B. All right, so let's put up on the screen Amos, if we would. Oh boy, that's kind of tiny. All right, you guys have probably better eyes than me. I have 16-point font on my paper because I can't read 11 and 12 font anymore without glasses. So Amos 5:21-24, and then 8:4-6 says this: I absolutely despise your festivals. I take no pleasure in your religious assemblies. Take away from me your noisy songs. I don't want to hear the music of your stringed instruments. Justice must flow like torrents of water, righteous actions like a stream that never dries up. And then in chapter 8, 4-6, he says, listen to this, you who trample the needy and do away with the destitute in the land. When will the Sabbath end so that we can open up the grain bins, they ask. We're eager to sell less for a higher price, to cheat the buyer with rigged scales. We're eager to trade silver for the poor and a pair of sandals for the needy. We want to mix in some chaff with the grain. And so I ask you, is this argument A, idolatry, or is this argument B, injustice? It's B, right? And then we see again in Isaiah 58, 3-7, it's up on the screen as well. And the people are saying to God, why have we fasted, they say, and you haven't seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you not noticed? Like, why aren't you paying attention? We're doing all of these worship things. Why aren't you watching? And God says, your fasting ends in quarreling, strife, and fistfights. Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, this is verse 6, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cord of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? And when you see them naked, clothe them and not turn away from your own flesh and blood? And so I ask you again, is this argument A, idolatry, or is this argument B, injustice? It's injustice, right? There are so many more passages like this. I only pulled out 2 of them, or actually technically 3, to show you there's so many more. And yes, idolatry was an issue and sexual immorality was an issue, but their injustice was just as much of an issue with Israel and why they ended up in exile. And so in all of these things, God is saying to them, He's just rejecting their worship out and out. They're fasting, they're throwing celebrations, they have elaborate parties and festivals, and they have these magnificent offerings and sacrifices, and yet He takes no delight in what they're doing. None. In fact, it's sickening to Him and detestable. And He's saying this is false worship. False worship will always insist that what we do in a church service matters more to God than how we act towards our neighbor, the stranger, or our enemy. False worship will always insist that what we do in church services matters more to God than how we act towards our neighbor, the stranger, and our enemy. And so what God is saying to them is that your religious activities are worthless and false if they aren't causing you to live justly. Because God does not divide worship and justice. They're not two different things to God. And I say this because the most common perversion of God's people is to expect our religious devotion to excuse our injustice. The most common perversion of God's people, whether it's Israel, us today, or generations past, is to use our religious devotion as an excuse for our injustice. So guys, listen. In consideration of what we've just seen from the Scriptures, can we really even think that we are mature followers of Jesus if we are not living justly? Maybe our measure of maturity should include our posture and our actions towards the vulnerable. We're going to have to wrestle with this because it's right there in the Scriptures. Is it time to make this a part of the standard of Christian maturity? And honestly, I can't make a case against it, given what I know from the Scriptures and what I just showed you. So let's take a breather. That was maybe a little intense, all right? I want to share with you a story about Christian maturity from the 2nd or 3rd century. They're not sure when this letter was written, but it was written to a man named Diognetus. And the writer was describing the seemingly contradictory existence of Christians in the world, all right? He said they dwell in Greek cities, they eat and dress like everyone else, and yet their citizenship confessedly contradicts expectation. And so what he was saying is they live in these cities, they eat, they dress like everybody else, but they don't participate in our pagan culture the same way that we do. They aren't doing the things that are normal for us. He says they marry and have children, but they do not discard unwanted infants. They were acting justly. They were actually taking care of unwanted babies back in that day. They were caring for the orphan. And then we get to my favorite part in this whole thing. It says, they share meals but not wives. Yeah. All right, so about a year ago, our small group went through a study something like this, and we ran across this story, and we were talking about it, and they're like, hey, you know what would be a great advertisement for a small group? Let's get some t-shirts made with like a table on it and people eating, and it says, share meals, not wives. And then we can wear them to church, and then we can like, hey, want to be part of our group? We share meals, not wives. And I was like, that is a terrible idea. I love it. Let's do it. And so I went to ChatGPT, because, here's the thing. I don't have a creative bone in my body. Like, I can't draw it, and I've seen some of the stuff AI does, and I thought, maybe it can help me, right? And so I go to ChatGPT, and I was like, design me a shirt that says, share meals, not wives. And ChatGPT really let me down. It responded and said, I'm sorry, we can't do this because it's hostile towards women. And I thought, when the heck did AI get a moral backbone? It doesn't make any sense to me. So anyhow, listen, if you're out there today and you can do graphic design stuff, can you make me a t-shirt that says share meals, not wives, that I can put on my shirt? Because I tell you, I can sell 20 of them right now. I promise you, 20 of them are going to get sold. He got one over here already. All right, so they shared meals and not wives. Moving on. They said they obeyed laws and that they surpassed them in their goodness. They were raising the bar. See, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount always was raising the bar. He said, here's the minimum. When you go a mile, you go 2. When they ask for your coat, give them your tunic as well, right? Jesus was always asking them to raise the bar and live above it, and that's what they were doing. And then it says, as citizens, they share in all things with others, and yet endure all things as foreigners. And I've got to think that somehow they realized that their true citizenship was in heaven and that they were living every day as if it was that future day. They were living knowing that they were foreigners in the land that they occupied, or I should say that occupied them, right? And they lived as if every day was that future day. I've given you a lot of Old Testament stuff, and now you're saying, but Matt, Are you going to talk about Jesus anytime? Because Jesus is really what matters, right? That's where the rubber meets the road. And so I'm glad you brought it up. As we go through some of these passages, I hope that you see Jesus a little bit differently. Put it up on the screen if you would, Luke 4. And at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, he went into the temple, or to the synagogue, and he grabbed a scroll from Isaiah, and he began to read it to the people, and he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, liberty to the captives, sight to the blind, liberty for the oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled it up in the ultimate mic drop, and he sat down, and he said, "Today, this has been fulfilled in your hearing." And everyone was just like, "Oh, isn't this the carpenter's son from down the road? Like, what's going on?" But here's the thing. Jesus then went out and did exactly what he said he was going to do in Isaiah. This is chapter 4 of Luke. Go ahead and read Luke 5 through 9 and see exactly what Jesus did. I'm going to give you a quick summary of what you'll find in Luke 9. All right, stay with me. I'm going to go really fast. Jesus heals a man with leprosy, a man who is paralyzed. He invites the outcast. He eats with sinners. He heals a Roman centurion's servant. He raises a widow's dead son. He restores a demon-possessed man. He raises a dead girl. He heals a demon-possessed boy, and he heals a sick woman. That's your summary of Luke 5 through 9. And when John the Baptist was doubtful about whether Jesus really was the Messiah, he sent some of his disciples to Jesus to ask him, "Are you really the Messiah?" And Jesus tells his disciples, "Go back and tell John this. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the leper is cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." Notice what Jesus didn't say. He didn't say, "Come ask me again after I've died and rose again." You see, John the Baptist knew his scriptures, and he knew that the Messiah would come and he would do these things. And so Jesus answers in this way. Even though John was still doubtful, he knew his scriptures. He knew that someday there would be a day when man and God and everything in it would be redeemed and restored, and everything that as it is today will not be that way anymore. He was waiting for the year of the Lord's favor, and this is what Jesus was inaugurating. So yes, Jesus' actions are 100% in line with God's desire for justice for his image bearers. He's doing what Israel was expected to do, but never could. Nearly everything he did was directed towards the poor and the vulnerable and the people on the margins. He gave them hope, and he never disappointed. Because what he was doing was he's giving them a sign and a foretaste of the world that is to come. And it was hope. When you're in that stage in life, this is good news. This is good news, that the way things are isn't going to be that the way they're going to stay. And now you're saying, "Okay, Matt, you've made your point about Jesus, but that was Jesus. He did those things. Does he really expect me to do that too?" Well, I'm glad you asked. In Matthew 15, 1 through 9, Jesus gets into an argument with the religious leaders when they were questioning and accusing his disciples of breaking with the tradition of washing their hands before meals. And Jesus looks at them and he's like, "Are you serious? Are you serious right now? Why do you break the commands of God for the sake of your traditions? Why do you break the commands of God for the sake of your traditions?" Notice, they aren't concerned about breaking commands. They're concerned about their traditions being broken. And Jesus looks them straight in the eye, and he quotes to them Isaiah 29:13. And he says, "These people," let me get it right here. He says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me." See, there's a lot of people who think God in the Old Testament is really fiery. You've not yet met Jesus in the New Testament. He isn't playing, all right? He says to them, "You are the ones whose hearts are far from me." And I think oftentimes we think Jesus is blasting them because they don't have the right emotions. They don't have the right heart. They're detached. They're just going through the rituals of their worship services. But that's not really what's going on. What had happened was the religious leaders had made traditions and rules that said you can take the resources and anything that you have or money that is allocated for the care of the poor and the vulnerable, and you can use it to make more elaborate worship services, sacrifices, and offerings. And they were literally stealing money from the church that was to be used for the care of people on the margins of society, and Jesus is pissed. Can I say that in church? I just did. He's pissed. I wonder if Jesus ever looks at our budgets, whether it's personal or business or even in the church, and he says, y'all are missing it. You all are missing it. You're putting too many of your resources in the wrong places. In Matthew 23, Jesus is once again lighting up the religious leaders, and he's saying, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and you neglect the weightier matters of the law, which are justice, mercy, and faithfulness." And once again, he's saying, you are missing the point. What I want for you is to act justly and to show mercy towards the vulnerable, because then I know that you are faithful. And then finally, in Matthew 25, he is describing the final judgment. And he says, all the nations will be before him, and he will separate the sheep from the goats. And then he will look at the sheep, and he will say, "For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. In prison, you came to me." And the sheep will say, and does anyone ever stop to wonder, like, the sheep are talking? Like, and the sheep will say, we just kind of just blow right through that and just don't even factor in the fact that the sheep are talking. But they say to him, "Lord, when did we see you in these states?" And Jesus replies and says, "When you did it to the least of these, you did it to me." My friend Jason asked me one morning over breakfast, he says, Jesus gave his followers, his disciples, a new command. Love others as I have loved you. And he says, what's the old command? If he gave a new command, what's the old command? I got to thinking about it. The old command was to love God and love others. And what Jesus is doing is he's now raising that bar. Because outside of the person of Jesus, we don't have it in us, in our capacity to love others the way that we need to. So we have to love others as Jesus loved others. And this is what he did. So Jesus was literally creating these pockets of Eden everywhere he goes, showing people that the way things are today is not going to be how they are in the future. He's giving them hope, and he's called us to live as if every day is that future day. We are hope bringers. So if I was going to summarize our little traipse through the Old Testament and New Testament, I would say, according to the prophets and Jesus, our religious activities are worthless and false if they aren't causing us to live and act justly. And even in Matthew 25, it gets even scarier, because as if we don't, we may find ourselves on the outside of the kingdom. Now, I'm not saying that we're losing our salvation and we're not getting in, but I think we need to take very seriously what Jesus is saying here. We really need to wrestle with that. All right, break time, another story. In the 4th century, there was a battle called the Battle of Adrianople. It marked the beginning of the end of the Roman Empire. And there was a bishop of Milan who, after the battle was over, he took all of his resources and he was buying the captives' freedom. He was spending his money to buy their freedom. And when he ran out of money, he took the sacramental vessels, the cup, the plate, the candles, whatever else he had in the church, and he melted them down, and he coined them into money. And then he proceeded to continue to buy the freedom of the captives. And when the people found out what he was doing, they said, "That is sacrilege. You cannot take the vessels that hold the Lord's blood and melt them down and do this. You can't do it." And Ambrose, man, what a dude. This is his response. He says, "The souls for which the Lord shed his blood are more precious than the vessels that contain that blood." I'm crushed every time I hear this story, because the souls, it is so 100% true, the souls for which Jesus shed his blood are more valuable than our doctrines and our vessels and all these other things that we think are so important. And he has an answer for them. This is the worship that God wants. And it breaks my heart every time I read it. Maybe you're still not convinced that the worship God desires involves valuing his image bearers. Let me share one last thing before we get to some application and closing. Biblical scholars have been studying and learning a lot about the contemporary cultures around Israel in that day. This would be like Egypt and Assyria and Babylon. And all of these cultures, though pagan, they had their temple inaugurations. They had their gods that they worshiped. And so they had these 7-day elaborate ceremonies, all right? Because they wanted to inaugurate the temple for their deity. Much like Solomon had his 7-day ceremony and party before the presence of God descended into the temple. And in these pagan cultures, the centerpiece, the climax, the apex of this celebration was the placing of the image of the deity in the temple. All right? This was the pinnacle of what they did. And it wasn't just symbolic. It wasn't just a symbolic representation of the deity. It actually represented the presence of the deity in that temple. The presence of the deity needed to be put there so that the temple could be inhabited. Now, some of you might be going, I think I know where you're going with this, Matt. Let me ask you, what was the pinnacle of God's 7-day creation? Creation of man. And in whose image was man created? In God's image. In God's image. We aren't made of brick or stone or wood idols. We are flesh and blood. And so God made man in his image, and he placed us, in Genesis 2, he made us outside of the garden, and he placed us in his garden, which was his temple. You guys following me? But this gets even better, because in these cultures, it was the people's responsibility to care for the deity. They had to protect and defend, and they had to make sure all the right rituals and offerings and sacrifices that were being made, because if they didn't, there was consequences for failing to protect and honor the idol in the temple. And it might mean there was a bad crop year, or maybe a foreign invader was going to come in and take them over. Like, bad things were going to happen. And so they actually believed that their participation helped along the natural function of the world that they inhabited. If it all stays in balance, if it all goes together, then all things are going to be right. Invaders would stay away, crops are going to get their rain, like it's all good. And I got to think that God is telling us something important in Genesis 1. The way that we properly honor and worship him is by taking care of his idol, his image, and that is us. So when Jesus says, what you have done to the least of these, you have done it to me, it's got to take on some new meaning, or it's got to mean a lot more. Because Israel's failure to do this resulted in their exile, their separation from God, their separation from the land. They were separated from the land. And Jesus is saying that if we fail, we may miss out on that future redeemed world. We will be separated from that redeemed world someday. We need to really weigh what Jesus is saying. Jen and I were missionaries in Romania nearly over 20 years ago. And while we were there, we saw the horrors of institutionalized orphan care. Romania was recovering and trying to come out of 40 years of communism, and it was a real struggle economically in that country. And women who had babies didn't have the means to care for them, and so they would drop them off at the doorstep of hospitals and just disappear. Gone. They wouldn't even leave names for the babies. And so the hospitals, they would take them in, and they would put them in cribs, and they would feed them a couple times a day, and they would change their diapers. But the thing is, these hospitals, they didn't have the means or the resources either to properly care for children, because in order for us to develop right, we have to have hugs and snuggles and tickles and eye contact and all these things, right? Because otherwise, we end up with massive issues. And so these children there, They had eye contact issues. They had developmental disabilities. They had attachment disorders. Some of them couldn't walk. They couldn't stand up. They were 5, 6, 8 years old in a crib, and they were 2 feet tall. Like, it was a human atrocity. It was a humanitarian crisis. And while we were there, it became very obvious to my wife and I of the imperative that we care for the orphan. We couldn't ignore it. It was right there in front of us. Well, sadly, Romania never opened up adoption. It was closed actually before we got there, and still to this day it's closed. And rather than opening things up and allowing people to come in and care for and adopt these children, they shut it off and they wanted to hide their shame. And so Jen and I then eventually moved back to the States. We started going to River Tree, and a man named Wes Stafford came and spoke at the church. He used to be the president of Compassion International. And he spoke about the importance of caring for children on the margins of society. And we were broke. We were broken because what had happened is we'd forgotten this imperative to care for the vulnerable because we no longer were in proximity to them. We weren't near them. We were detached from their suffering, and so we forgot. Let that be a warning that if you're not in the presence or near people who suffer, you're going to forget, and you're going to use it as an excuse to ignore what's going on. And so we came home that day. And we started the process of adopting our daughter from Ethiopia. Christ is nearly 15 years old today. She is a constant reminder in our lives that we must care for those who can't care for themselves. She is the person who the Lord uses to remind me that injustices still exist in this world. You see, she was given up by her mom because she couldn't care for her. She couldn't care for her because her father died before she was born of malaria. You've seen these things, I'm sure. These things like malaria and preventable diseases, they are wreaking havoc across the world today. And you know what? The church can do something about it. We can do something about it. These are the injustices that so many people live with, of trying to avoid getting bitten by a mosquito because of the destruction that it brings. So how do I participate? The good news is you don't have to be in vocational ministry. You don't have to get paid to do any of this. You can do it right where you are today. It means that you can become a doctor, a dentist, a researcher, someone who helps people. Maybe you can be a dentist who puts a new set of teeth in someone's mouth so that the first time in their life they can smile with dignity. Maybe you can be a researcher who finds cures or preventions for some of these preventable diseases that are out there so that daughters like mine don't have to get adopted out because the mothers don't have the skills or the education or the resources to care for their children. You can get connected with organizations like Safe Harbor, which we partner with here at Living Water, who rescue women and children out of sex trafficking. You can get involved locally at food pantries and homeless shelters and zoning commissions. You can run for political offices locally. All these things. You can serve in so many ways. Maybe you know how to speak Spanish or another language, and you can start in your church English as second language classes so that immigrants can pass their citizenship tests. Maybe you can make a meal for someone and invite them over, because sitting at the table is an incredible way to bridge so many gaps and reduce so many barriers and get them right in front of our King. One of the most important things is that we don't do this alone. God knows nothing of solitary religion. Almost every word written in the Bible is written to a people, not a person. So you guys need to find people in your communities, in your churches, at your colleges, in your small groups, whatever it might be. Figure out your spiritual gifts, your natural talents, the abilities that God has given you, and find a way to go and serve those who need to be served and cared for and loved. And Jason, I'm teeing you up, man. I'm teeing you up. Because what we have to do is we get to show the world these little pockets of Eden, showing them once again that the way things are isn't going to be the way that they will be. And this is good news, and this is the hope that we have. So in reconciling the world to himself, Jesus formed for himself a people who will live as if every day is that future day. Because the way things are today is not the way they're going to remain. The work that we do now will not be extinguished. It will be redeemed. So the things that you do carry on into that next life. They're not extinguished. And this gives people a foretaste and a hope of the Eden to come. To Jesus be all glory and honor forever and ever. Amen. So this was titled Kingdom Value. You're probably wondering where the value is. The value is you. The value is the image bearer of God. That is who he cares about and who he loves. And now that you know this is your challenge. You need to tell others about this. Don't keep it to yourself. The best way to learn it is to teach it and to do it. And for 20 years, I've had people say to me, I can never lead a small group because I don't know what you know. And I said, you know what? I don't know these things because I don't teach them because I know them. I know them, or I said, I don't teach because I know. I know because I teach. So if you want to learn this, teach it to someone else and go and do it for yourself. Thank you. Father God, I think so many times we walk by an image bearer of you and we give no second thought to it. And I've done this so many times in my life, Lord. Forgive me for it. But I pray that everyone here has a fire lit inside of them, knowing now that this isn't an optional thing. It is central to who you are and how you love us. So Jesus, I just ask that you continue to change us. Continue to strip away all the cultural baggage that comes along with the word justice. Strip away these preconceived ideas that the only thing that matters is that my relationship with me and God were just fine. Allow us to worship in ways that honor God because we love those who you love, Jesus. And allow us never to do this out of our own desire, our own will, because you know that it will fail 100 times out of 100. You are the reason, Jesus, that we can do these things. And it's when we speak these things in our actions that people will come in contact with the King of the world. We love you, Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.